Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Daria, and I'm a communications advisor in the Borders Biosecurity and Trade Program in DEFRA, which is the team that has and continues to develop the policy around the new SPS import controls for plant and animal products, moving between the GB and EU. Next slide, please. Today, I'll be leading the presentation together with Communications Sector Lead Sarah Johnson, and we have various DEFRA, AFA, HMRC colleagues on hand for the Q&A section at the end, including Richard Watson, the co-head of policy design, Tidia Coleman, the policy lead for Landbridge Transits, Leo Blackman, the policy lead for West Coast Policy, Heather Scala for live animal questions. We also have George Miller from HMRC, who will talk to us about the interaction between SPS import notifications and custom declarations, which we have heard is a question a lot of Irish exporters currently have. Can we please move to the next slide, please? Thank you. Today, we'll be covering changes to the process for importing EU plants, plant products, animals and animal products into GB from the island of Ireland that are subject to sanitary and phytosanitary controls from the 31st of January 2024. Due to time constraints, we won't be talking in detail about risk categories of individual products, movement of Northern Ireland qualifying goods, or controls outside SPS controls, such as custom controls or Home Office controls. Next slide, please. We would love to hear all of your questions, and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to drop your questions throughout the presentation by pressing the QA button you should be seeing on the top of your screen. We'll be moderating the questions and answering those relevant to today's topics. Next slide, please. To break up our session today, we will have 3 different polls pop up in our session. These will all be anonymous, and it will only take 1 click to answer. Your answers will help us understand how to prepare you're feeling for the upcoming changes. Next slide, please. You should be seeing the first poll pop up right now. We'll give you half a minute to quickly respond to that before we continue. Next slide, please. Let's begin. In late August last year, the UK government published a final border target operating model, or BTOM for short, setting out our approach to sanitary and phytosanitary controls at the border. The final BTOM was published following extensive engagement with the border industry and businesses across the UK and EU, and it incorporates feedback from the draft border target operating model, which was published in April 2023. You can read the full BTOM document through the link on the slide. However, we'll be going through the main parts that impact Irish exporters today. Next slide, please. The BTOM has been developed to minimise trader burdens and maintain UK's high biosecurity standards while remaining aligned with international standards. Our approach under the new model has 3 key elements. Firstly, it introduces a new risk-based approach to border controls. Goods are categorised into risk groups of high, medium, and low, and controls have been appropriately weighted against the risk. It introduces simplified and digitised health certificates, which maintain the control needed, however, reduces opportunities for administrative error by removing unnecessary detail. And lastly, the focus on the use of trust. We'll pilot schemes with industry where authorised importers of plant and plant products and some animal products may be eligible for facilitations to make importing easier. The new model has 3 main components to maintain the set-out border controls for SPS goods. These components are import notification in advance of a consignment arriving into GB. This supports action at points of entry, allowing officials to target their activities at shipments posing the biggest risk. The detail allows traceability, enabling animal, plant, and public health authorities to identify and respond to an outbreak or emerging threat. Health certification, which provides assurance as it requires authorized officials in exporting countries to certify that the goods have been produced to safe standards required by the importing country. These are monitored through documentary checks. And lastly, physical inspection, which usually occurs at border control posts and will allow health officials to check that the goods match health certification and to identify any trends of concern and non-compliance and to sample the goods for any pests and diseases. Next slide, please. When GB first left the EU, certain measures were put in place for the movement of goods between GB and Ireland. These initial measures will come to an end and export from Ireland, apart from NI qualifying goods, will start to align with official SBS controls under the BTOM. And today we'll walk you through what this will mean for each commodity group for the 31st of January 2024. Qualifying Northern Ireland goods will continue to benefit from unfettered access to the Great Britain market, whether moving directly from Northern Ireland to Great Britain or indirectly via Ireland. Next slide, please. Before we get into specifics, we'll quickly go over the three main Ireland-specific BTOM import control changes. From 31st of January 2024, import notification will be required in advance of consignments of animal products, unless exempt, high-risk food and feed not of animal origin, and medium and high-risk plant and plant products arriving at GB point of entries. EHCs will be required for high-risk and medium-risk animal products, and PCs, phytosanitary certificates, will be required for high and medium-risk plant and plant products. There will also be a later start date for physical checks for Ireland. This will be no earlier than 31st of October 2024. And there will be no identity seal checks for GB Landbridge transits to EU on the Irish-facing leg until physical checks start on goods coming from Ireland. Next slide, please. Now I'll pass on to my colleague Sarah to talk to you about the specific import requirements from 31st of January 2024 for goods arriving from Ireland into GB. Next slide, please.
For high-risk category plants and plant products. From the 31st of January 2024, for imports of EU high-risk category plants and plant products from the island of Ireland into Great Britain, continue to obtain a phytosanitary certificate, or PC, and to submit an import notification in advance of a consignment arriving at a Great Britain port of entry, for example, at sea or an airport. EU goods will still be subject to border checks at place of destination, PODs. Non-EU goods will still be subject to border checks at border control posts, BCPs, or control posts. And here we're talking about products imported from the island of Ireland that are not qualifying Northern Ireland goods. Next slide, please. Medium risk plants and plant products. From the 31st of January 2024, for the imports of EU medium risk category plants and plant products from the island of Ireland into GB, obtain a phytosanitary certificate for consignment of medium risk plants and plant products before it enters Great Britain. Initial certification easements that were put in place for Ireland will come to an end, and that's from 31st of January. The operator responsible for the consignment, once it reaches GB, should submit an import notification to the Great Britain authorities in advance of the consignment's arrival at a GB port of entry. This aligns with the import controls for other EU and EFTA countries. Next slide, please. Low-risk plants and plant products. From January 2024, for the import of EU low-risk category plants and plant products from the island of Ireland into Great Britain, low-risk plants and plant products imported into Great Britain from the EU will be exempt from SPS controls at the border. Next slide, please. High-risk food and feed of non-animal origin. Next slide, please. Changes from the 31st of January 2024. From the 31st of January, for high-risk food and feed, not of animal origin goods, imported into Great Britain via EU and EFTA countries, goods will continue to require import notification using IPATs 1 working day in advance of arrival into a Great Britain port of entry, seaports and airports. Goods imported via Ireland that are not qualifying Northern Ireland goods will require import notification for the first time. In addition, products listed in Annex 2 of Regulation 2019/1793 will require an export health certificate. Next slide, please. Live animals. Next slide, please. Qualifying live animal consignments that are qualifying Northern Ireland live animals from the island of Ireland. These will benefit from unfettered access at all stages, subject only to controls which existed prior to the end of the transition period or are essential to meeting international obligations, voluntary customs procedures, the ATA carnet for high-value animals temporarily moving to Great Britain, and any biosecurity threat. Next slide, please. For consignments other than food and feed, qualifying Northern Ireland goods are those which are present in Northern Ireland and not under a customs procedure. This includes live animals moving from Northern Ireland ports or directly from Northern Ireland ports in the Republic or directly from Northern Ireland to ports in the Republic of Ireland for onward movement to Great Britain. For live animal qualifying Northern Ireland live animals, existing controls continue to apply. These movements must be in accordance with the conditions of the relevant import licence, which may require it to be accompanied by a health certificate and notified in advance using IPATs. Separate guidance has been published on Gov.uk on the specific arrangements for consignments and animals moving into and out of Northern Ireland, which are set out under the Windsor framework. Next slide, please. Moving non-qualifying Northern Ireland live animals to Great Britain from the island of Ireland. From the 31st of January 2024, live animals, other than those which are qualifying Northern Ireland movements, will continue to require an export health certificate and notification in advance of arrival using IPATs. Live animals will continue to undergo checks at destination as they do currently when imported into Great Britain. No earlier than the 31st of October 2024. Documentary, identity and physical checks on entry to Great Britain will be introduced for EU and non-qualifying Northern Ireland live animal movements from the island of Ireland to Great Britain. Next slide, please. Germinal products. Next slide, please. High-risk germinal products from EU and EFTA countries. Germinal products are any germinal product that includes semen, oocytes, and embryos intended for artificial reproduction and hatching eggs. Germinal products have been categorised as high risk. From the 31st of January, germinal product imports from EU and EFTA countries will continue to require import notification, health certification, and documentary checks. Import notifications submitted using IPATs will switch from the IMP to the CHED format. Some consignments from EU and EFTA countries will continue to be selected for identity and physical checks to take place at destination, as they are now. Next slide, please. Animal products. Next slide, please. Animal products, changes to controls. From the 31st of January 2024, imports of EU, i.e. not qualifying Northern Ireland goods, animal products subject to official sanitary and phytosanitary controls from the island of Ireland. Import notifications will be required for these consignments, and health certifications or export health certificates will be required on imports of medium risk animal product consignments. High-risk animal products will continue to require export health certificates. Next slide, please. No earlier than the 31st of October 2024. The introduction of risk-based identity and physical checks on EU, i.e. not qualifying Northern Ireland goods, medium risk animal products moving from the island of Ireland. Please note that qualifying Northern Ireland goods will continue to benefit from unfettered access to the Great Britain market, whether moving directly from Northern Ireland to Great Britain or indirectly via Ireland. Next slide, please. Poll 2. Please do take part in this poll. This question is thinking about the changes your organisation might need to make to get ready for the new import controls. Please indicate what stage your organisation is at. It should appear on your screen right now. Please do take a moment to answer. It's just a snapshot, so don't think too hard about it. We're doing it across all of the information sessions that we're running, and we're using the feedback to make sure that we are targeting the right information at the right place and to find out how you're feeling about the changes coming up. If you have taken part, you can just press the little X in the top right-hand corner to get rid of it off of your screen. And we'll just leave that open a while longer. Next slide, please. I'm now handing back to Daria to take you through the next part of this session.
Hi, everyone. Now that we've gone through all the import requirements for each category, we will talk about how you should prepare for the first milestone. There are 3 main steps we advise traders to follow. First of all, and most importantly, knowing your risk category, based on that being prepared for the certification requirement, and lastly, being ready for the import notification requirement. Next slide, please. Now let's walk through each one of these and the support we have to help you while you get prepared for these steps. As mentioned previously, the first and probably most important step is to determine the risk category of your goods. This is because the UK government applies SPS controls to products proportionately based upon their import risk category. You will need to know the risk category of your goods in order to follow the correct process. On the right side of the screen, you can see import controls and requirements for each risk category. Next slide, please. To find your risk category, you'll first need to find the commodity code of your product. You can do this by looking up your product on the trade tariff on gov.uk. Once you find your commodity, you can find the risk category of your product by using either our risk category summary tables or our searchable list for commodity codes. The links of these were both shared with you before the event, but are also on the slide right now. Next slide, please. The second step is to be prepared to get health certificates for your products if they are a medium risk or a high risk product. Imported goods may carry risks that need to be controlled to protect the biosecurity of Great Britain and the United Kingdom. The risk varies across commodities. For permitted imports that require health certificate, the certificate sets out the requirements to mitigate that risk. Next slide, please. From 31st of January 2024, for imports of animal products, we encourage the use of a digitally signed and verifiable GB Export Health Certificate, or EHC for shorter, in place of a paper version of the certificate. We will accept verifiable PDF certificates from tracers and other EU EFTA member state systems that are listed on gov.uk. To obtain an EHC, the exporter must create the EHC in the system, ensure it has been digitally signed by the competent authority in the exporting country, and download the EHC as a PDF format document. Following this, the exporter will need to send the PDF to the person submitting the import notification so that it can be attached to the notification. Where a verifiable PDF certificate cannot be provided by the EU or EFTA country exporting the goods, a paper copy is used, A scanned copy must be uploaded to IPAFS and the competent authority must send original paper certificate to accompany the consignment. Next slide, please. You can use the Export Health Certificate leaflet published online to get more in-depth knowledge on what the certificate is, how to get one, and what you need to do with it. We also have guidance on how to complete a health certificate and examples of model health certificates on gov.uk. Next slide, please. And what about for plant product movement from Ireland to GB? Exporters may need to get a phytosanitary certificate from the exporting country's competent authority that shows the plant or plant products has officially been inspected and meets import phytosanitary requirements for entry into GB based on their risk category. You can see on the right side of the slide the health certificate requirement for plant products. We're also currently in the process of rolling out e-phyto for EU member states. For each competent authority has different requirements on how to obtain a phytosanitary certificate, so you'll need to check with your country's process. You can find out who your competent authority is by visiting the International Plant Protection Convention website. Next slide, please. To get further information on what a phytosanitary certificate is, how to get one, and what you need to do with it, you can read our phytosanitary certificate leaflet, which the link is currently on the slide. We also have additional guidance on gov.uk listed on the slide, as well as training sessions. Next slide, please. And last step in preparing for the first BTOM milestone is to be ready for the import notification requirement. The person or operator responsible for the consignment when it arrives at a GB port of entry will need to submit an import notification via IPAFS, in line with the current import notification requirement that applies to EU and EFTA imports. The responsible person operator should have a UK address. An import notification must be made by the person or operator responsible for the consignment to the authorities 1 working day before the expected arrival of the goods and can be made up to 30 days before arrival. Depending on the products in the consignment, an import notification may include information on commodity, such as the commodity name, commodity code, weight, treatment, processing, or temperature requirements. The reason for import, for example, for GB market or for transit. Geographical information such as country of origin, country of consignment, and place of destination. The port of entry, the date and estimated time of arrival. Transport information including mode of travel for the consignment and where relevant identification details for the transport such as the vessel name or trailer ID. Contact details for the consignor. This can be person, company sending the consignment to GB. The person responsible for the consignment once it arrives into GB, and the consignee, the person, company receiving the import in GB if different from the responsible person. PDFs of supporting documents should be uploaded also, such as an export health certificate, which will be a requirement from the 31st of January for high and medium risk products, commercial documents, commercial invoices, waybills, or bill of landing. Before you submit the notification, you'll be asked to review the information and then agree the declaration. Import notifications are not required for low-risk plant and plant products or composite products exempt from SPS controls. Check the composite decision tree now available on gov.uk. The page linked to our leaflets for business. From the page linked to our leaflets for businesses in our joining email. Next slide, please. To complete an import notification, the person or operator responsible for the consignment in GB will need to register to use IPAFS via the link on the slide. IPAFS allows you to create and submit an import notification for a consignment. It will guide you through a series of questions about the consignment and the specific commodities in the consignment. IPAFS provides help text for most questions. There is an introduction to import notification leaflets on gov.uk as well, which you can use. There are information sessions coming up on import notifications for animal products and high-risk food and feed of non-animal origin. And there are recordings on AFA's YouTube channel. The link was in the joining email. The Plant Health portal also provides information and support on import notifications for plant and plant products, which you can see the links for on the slide right now. Next slide, please. Now that we've gone through the 3 steps for getting prepared for the first milestone, we'll talk about using Great Britain as a land bridge for EU imports. Land bridge transits are movements of goods from one third country to another passing through Great Britain. The goods move through but do not stay in GB. This includes moving goods from the island of Ireland to EU using GB as a land bridge. Next slide, please. Some goods that transit through the UK using GB as a land bridge can pose biosecurity and public health risks. This includes live animal consignments and animal product consignments. These consignments will need to meet sanitary and phytosanitary controls aligned with the border target operating model from the 31st of January 2024. Next slide, please. So what does this exactly mean? Well, from the 31st of January 2024 for animal products, you will require transit health certificates from this date for medium risk animal products and continue to require them for high risk animal product consignments. You will need to make import notifications on IPAFs for all risk categories. Sample documentary checks may be completed on Landbridge transit notifications by the central hub. Entry and exit from GB can continue through any GB point of entry or exit, and the confirmation of exit email should still be sent to AFA for germinal products and DEFRA for products of animal origin, as per current process. Next slide, please. From the 30th of April 2024, all consignments using GB as a land bridge must be sealed. You will need to continue obtaining transit health certificates for medium and high-risk consignments and ensure your low-risk consignments travel with commercial documentation. Next slide, please. What about identity and physical checks? Under the BTOM import controls for using GB as a land bridge, high-risk consignments will be subject to 100% documentary checks conducted by the PHA or local authority on entry into GB. There'll be 100% identity seal checks conducted on entry and exit, and physical inspection will only be required if non-compliance is suspected at the identity seal check. For medium risk consignments, there'll be 100% documentary checks conducted by the PHA on entry into GB. I believe we're on the wrong slide. Nikki, could you please go one slide back? Okay, we'll stay on this one. Physical inspection will be required if non-compliance is suspected at the identity seal check. Low-risk consignments will not be subject to routine checks on entry or exit, but could be a part of PHA surveillance checks. However, there will be a different timeline for implementation of identity checks on goods arriving from the island of Ireland into GB. And this means from the 30th of April 2024 until the date is determined, and this will be no earlier than October 2024, there will be no entry identity checks when EU and non-qualifying Northern Ireland goods leave the island of Ireland or enter via GB points of entry to transit to the EU. There will also be no exit identity checks when EU goods transit GB and use GB ports to move to the island of Ireland. Next slide, please. Now we'll go through a step-by-step guide of what traders will need to do when using GB as a land bridge while transiting animal products from Ireland to GB to the EU. You'll first need to determine the risk category of your goods and organize a health certificate if the goods are high or medium risk. You'll also need to review our transit guidance and confirm all prerequisites are met for all stages of the journey. Once this has been completed, the GB SBS notification of consignment will need to be submitted on IPAFs, as well as other relevant customs and transit declarations. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I think there was an issue with slides rearrangement. This was the previous slide we were talking about. Nikki, if we can pass the next slide. Perfect. As previously said, for Ireland, there will be no entry seal checks for goods transiting through GB to the EU until controls commence on EU and non-qualified Northern Ireland goods entering the island of Ireland. This will be no earlier than 31st of October 2024. At this point, the goods can continue to the GB point of exit location. Next slide. Once consignments reach the GB point of exit location, the consignment may be selected for an exit identity check. This will depend on the risk category of your consignment. On the blue box on the right side of the screen, you can see that each risk category and different check rates. If the consignment is selected for an exit identity check, it will need to be presented to the BCP at the point of exit selected in the IPAF's notification, which you can find the location of in our BCP maps. If the consignment passes the identity check, it can leave the BCP and GB to continue its journey to the destination country. An email confirmation that the consignment has left GB territory, including bill of landing or equivalent, should be sent to PHA at the exit BCP within 15 days from the date of the consignment's entry. More information on this can be found on our transit guidance. If consignment does not pass the identity check, it will be subject to a physical inspection. If it passes the physical inspection, the driver can leave the BCP and GB to continue its journey to the destination country. Email confirmation that the consignment has left GB territory, including bill of landing and equivalent, should be sent to PHA at exit BCP within 15 days from the date of consignment's entry. Again, you can refer to our transit guidance for more information. If it does not pass the physical inspection, the consignment will be subject to standard rejection procedures. If the consignment is not selected for an entry or for an exit identity check, the driver can proceed to leave GB without presenting to the BCP at the GB point of exit, and the goods can continue their journey to the destination country. Email confirmation that the consignment left GB territory, including bill of landing or equivalent, should be sent to PHA at the exit BCP within 15 days from the date of consignment of entry. So what we've gone through is the process that goods will that exporters will need to follow when transiting goods from Ireland to GB to the EU, using GB as a land bridge from April onwards. Next slide, please. And lastly, for GB land bridge transits, we will quickly talk through plant and plant product transits. Plant and plant products that transit through GB do not require pre-notification via the imports via IPAFs for entry or exits. Goods will continue to require a signed declaration stating that the goods are under phytosanitary transit and are packaged in such a way that there is no risk of spreading the pest through Great Britain. Next slide, please. So here's poll number 3. It should appear on your screen shortly. Again, please take a moment to answer the question and don't think about it too long. The question is, how confident are you that your organization will be fully prepared for the import controls that will be introduced from 31st of January? The results of these polls are useful for us to snapshot how businesses are thinking about the changes coming up, and we'll run them in all of our information sessions. So we'll stay on here for a moment before I pass it back on to my colleague and invite our HMRC colleague, George Miller, onto the screen. Perfect. Nikki,
Next
could you
slide, please? Excellent, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've had quite a few questions relating to customs and customs declarations, customs clearance for goods moving from the island of Ireland to Great Britain. So I'm very pleased to have George Miller on the call with us from HMRC to answer some of those pre-submitted questions. So George, thank you for joining us. The first question is, what changes are being implemented on the customs side for the end of January 2024?
Thanks, Sarah, and hi all. Yeah, I'm George Miller. I'm from one of the customs policy teams in HM Revenue and Customs. So as to the changes that are being implemented on the customs side on the 31st of January, there are a few major changes coming in on the 31st of January for movements from Ireland to GB from a customs perspective. So the first of those changes relates to the making of customs declarations, where the delayed declarations easement that has been in place since the beginning of 2021 will be coming to an end. So this means that the ability to make an entry in your records, to declare goods with an entry in your records without an authorization, and then to delay the supplementary declaration by up to 175 days, that will end from the 31st of January. And this means that unless you're authorized appropriately, then you'll need to make a full electronic customs declaration for most goods at or before the point at which you move your goods from Ireland into GB, and there will be some variation on when you need to make that customs declaration depending on the location. So specifically on roll-on, roll-off ferry routes, and I think there were a couple of questions in the chat already about that. You will need to make your customs declaration prior to the goods leaving Ireland, destined for Great Britain. The goods vehicle movement service will also be necessary for freight movements that are moving via those roll-on, roll-off ferry routes, and that includes non-SPS movements. You'll need to work as a trader. You'll need to work with your haulier to ensure that your goods are covered by a goods movement reference that includes all of the necessary customs declarations. And to very briefly explain, the GVMS is a service that effectively groups together customs declaration references into a single reference that is then presented to the ferry operator on exit from Ireland, that allows the automatic processing of all of the customs declarations that have been made for entry into GB. GVMS will also apply if you're moving qualifying Northern Ireland goods. So you will also need a goods movement reference if you're moving those qualifying Northern Ireland goods, as well as for goods that are moving directly from Ireland into GB. But if you are moving qualifying Northern Ireland goods, you will only need to indicate on your goods movement reference that you are moving those qualifying Northern Ireland goods and that you don't require a customs declaration. I should say there will be very few exceptions where a customs declaration is still required for movements of qualifying Northern Ireland goods, and that will be for excise goods and for movements of endangered species, and a very small other subset of commodities which will be sort of made available on gov.uk. So that's a very quick sort of summary of the customs changes that are coming in on the 31st. So at midnight going into the 31st of January.
That's great. Thank you, George. Next set of questions are very much about the connection between import notifications and customs declarations. And the first question is very practical, actually. Do you need to declare the import notification on the custom declaration, and how do you do that?
Sure. So yes is the answer. So you'll need to include the IPAF's notification reference on your customs declaration that you need to make before you move into GB, if you're moving via those roll-on, roll-off ferry routes. The way to do that is either yourself or through the sort of customs intermediary that you might have to manage your customs declarations, is to include that import notification reference within a specific data element of your CDS, your customs declaration service import declaration. So it's within data element 2-3 of your import declaration. So you'll need to include the document code and also the document reference, and you can check the documents that are needed for each commodity of goods in the online trade tariff that Dee showed up on screen earlier, and happy to share a link to that as well. That will also contain some more detailed information about the information to include within the CDS import declaration.
That's great, thank you, George. And also the links to the collection for customs declarations, the guidance on gov.uk, is in your joining email, as is the trade tariff tool as well. So you'll have that link already. Next question, on a similar vein, what if there is an issue with a customs entry and we need to cancel it? Does that impact the import notification too?
So it shouldn't impact the import notification, and you shouldn't need to resubmit the IPAFS import notification, but you would obviously need to then, if you are resubmitting a customs declaration, you would need to include the import notification reference from that IPAFS import notification in the new customs declaration.
Right, and conversely, what if there's an issue with the import notification and we need to create a new one? Can we change the import notification reference number in the customs declaration after it's been submitted?
So yes, if you've created a new IPAFS pre-notification, and so you have a new reference, you will need to update that within your customs import declaration. You should update that data element 2-3 of your import declaration with the new pre-notification reference number, and importantly, you'll want to do this before the declaration is what we call arrived, which is effectively marked as the goods having moved into GB. So this would be when the goods arrive in GB and they're presented to customs. If you're moving via a roll-on, roll-off ferry, you will need to update that customs declaration information before the goods board the ferry in Ireland.
Excellent, thank you. Another very practical question, actually, that's been pre-submitted. Who is responsible for making the customs declaration?
So if you're involved in sort of importing goods into Great Britain, you can either deal with customs declarations yourself, or you can hire someone to deal with customs and the transport of goods for you. The specific point around who is responsible for making the customs declaration may depend on the sort of commercial, the Incoterms that are agreed between various parties. But again, there's a sort of step-by-step guide for importing goods on gov.uk, which includes some links to information about customs intermediaries and a sort of a list of customs agents who are able to help with making customs declarations for importing goods.
Excellent, thank you. And last question in this section. If the customs declaration has multiple consignments, how will it know which one is subject to SPS controls and has the import notification?
So the short answer is that a pre-notification reference needs to be entered at item level in a customs declaration. So where a customs declaration has multiple line items, there might be different pre-notification reference requirements that apply to those different items. The need for an import pre-notification reference to be entered on CDS is flagged and triggered by the commodity code of the item that is declared in CDS. So if there is a commodity code which attracts the need for a pre-notification reference, and again you can find that information in the trade tariff, then CDS will ask for that pre-notification reference to be included within the import declaration.
Great, thank you. Really useful information there, practical information about the connection between import notifications and custom declarations. So on to question 3. Do VAT or duties need to be paid on imports from Ireland?
So yes, and I think the point I would make is that customs duties and VAT have applied for imports of EU goods since the 1st of January 2021, when the transition period with the EU ended. So from the customs perspective, the change that is happening on the 31st of January is around the rules regarding when and in what form customs declarations need to be submitted. So there aren't any immediate changes to whether or not customs duties and VAT apply, which will continue to be the case from the 31st of January, but has been the case since January 2021. Again, and not to repeat myself too much around the online trade tariff, but it is a helpful tool to not only find out the documents that you need to provide, but also to find out what the duty rates are for goods that are being imported from various destinations. The other point to note is that you might be able to pay no customs duty or a reduced amount of duty for goods that you bring into the UK, depending on what they are and what you do with them. So, for instance, if you're bringing goods in to process them or on a temporary basis, then there are opportunities to pay reduced rates of duty or to not pay duty. And again, I'm sure we can communicate the gov.uk links to those processes.
Great stuff. And on to the last question then. Do you have an update on the single trade window for customs declarations?
I do indeed. It's not specifically my update, so if I sound like I'm reading a script, then apologies, I am. The single trade window program is now firmly in delivery, so we're starting with foundations, and then new features are being added iteratively. So the foundational service offers a user interface for traders to complete and manage their own import declarations. And in December 2023, we had our first trader connecting to the single trade window live service for the first time in a controlled environment. So more traders will be invited to take part in testing shortly, and then the service will be available for public use in early 2024 following this testing. As we develop the single trade window, we'll add features for a broader group of traders and start to offer functionality for hauliers and agents, such as GVMS integration, ability to amend declarations, cloning, managing authorizations, and the submission of safety and security declarations. While testing the live service is starting with a small group of traders, we're continuing to develop and deliver the single trade window in conjunction with a much broader group of border users, and that includes user research and co-design. And we've completed over 100 engagements already with industry, with over 400 pieces of internal and external user research. So a developing picture on the single trade window, but the next point to look out for is when the service will be available for public use later in early 2024.
That's great. So that brings to an end the pre-submitted customs questions, although I imagine there are quite a few questions in the Q&A around this topic as well. But just a huge thank you to George and to his colleagues who are behind the scenes on this call as well. It was something that traders have been asking for, to have a customs section in these information sessions. So we're really, really happy that George was able to join us today. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Next slide, Nikki, please. Okay, so we've given you a lot of information today. We are looking at how we can provide an FAQ back to you for these questions, but also just to say that we have been kind of integrating the many questions we've had across all the information sessions into additional guidance on Gov.uk, which is obviously the main UK government website. And there is a link there, you might be able to click it, but it's also in the joining email that we sent to you today. But there are various leaflets and tools available now. So there's an introduction to export health certificates for imports into Great Britain. There's an introduction to import notifications. There are now 2 decision trees for composite products. One decision tree to work out, is your product a composite product? And the second to work out whether your composite product is exempt from controls, SBS controls. We've also got now a border control post leaflet for plants and plant products, and we're currently working on an animal products version of this as well. So this is a guide to controls at the border for imports into Great Britain. Also on that page, there are the link to the YouTube channel that we're using, that we're uploading the information session recordings to, so you can re-watch those. We're recording this one as well, so this should be up, where are we? Probably early next week. Next slide, please. There are a number of other things that we're doing. Well, so we have a trader readiness survey. It's a little bit more in depth than the polls that you've been taking here, but it's still open. You're able to take part in it if you haven't already. We've got a lot more sessions coming up. Tomorrow we have a session on making an import notification for high-risk food and feed not of animal origin from the 31st of January and how to do that. On Friday, we have a similar information session for making an import notification for animal products, and that includes germinal products, products of animal origin for human consumption like dairy and meat, animal byproducts, and composite products. And I've probably forgotten one of those. Should be 5 things I said there. So do check those out. The Eventbrite link, that's the collection to all the events that are going on. We also have a number of plants and plant product events going on as well, all the way up until post-April. So if you can actually follow that link as well, so you'll get an alert when new events are added, which is quite good. We've also got a business readiness forum that is happening every 2 weeks now. You can join that, you can ask questions. For more information and joining details, please email the address that you see on the screen. And as I mentioned earlier, we also have a YouTube playlist on the Animal and Plant Health Agency's YouTube channel. And a link is there and also in your